16 seeds were out by the quarterfinals. 3 Taiwanese players became champions. Wang Ziyi was finally able to overcome Seong, and Kim Won-ho and Seo Sun-jae continue to prove just how strong they really are. Yes, this year's Yonex All England Open Championships was an incredible one. It was a very unpredictable one. Like I said, by the quarterfinal stage, 16 of the 40 seeds were out. That's 40% by the end of the second round. And most of those, unsurprisingly, were in the men's events, the men's singles and the men's doubles. But also, they happened a lot in the mixed doubles, an event which probably had the most surprising final of them all. But I'll get to all of that and more later on in this week's episode of Beckman's Breakdown, the show where I take a look at all of the BWF World Tour events from Super 750 up to Super 1000. Well, it's not up to, it's Super 750 and Super 1000, also including the majors and the team events. Yes, this week was the All England, and as you can tell, a lot happened. In fact, almost too much. It is too much for me to talk about every single little thing. For all these events, whenever I do a breakdown, I have a document where I make notes on particular matches, things that have happened, just general thoughts and feelings so I don't forget anything. This week on the All England, I managed to write almost 9,000 words in just notes. That's more than most of my scripts, and you know how long my videos are. But anyway, I've done my best to condense it all and pick out the main topics. Plus, of course, I'll answer a number of your amazing questions at the end. But before any of that, a quick reminder that if you want to purchase any of the Beckman's Breakdown merchandise, you can do so using the link in the description. And lastly, before I get into this video, if you want to, you can like the video. I hope you do. And if you haven't subscribed already, then please do subscribe. It does help the channel, but only do so if you really enjoy this or you just want to help me out. It is literally one simple click. But anyway, that's the usual YouTube crap out of the way. I know you're here for one thing and one thing only, and that is my Beckman's Breakdown. Now, the way I've kind of done this is that obviously before this All England I made a number of predictions, and as you can tell by the fact I said it's been an unpredictable and very surprising All England, you're going to get no prizes for guessing that a number of my predictions didn't go particularly well. A few of them did. But I think using my predictions as a structure for this episode works pretty well. It allows me to go through, obviously, my predictions, but also it gets me onto talking about a number of different matches and players and all sorts. And I think anything that isn't covered in enough detail will probably get answered in the questions, because I've picked out, I think, 10 questions to answer. So anyway, let me crack on. So my predictions, let's start with the men's singles. My top prediction was Xiu-Chi, and Xiu-Chi lost in the first round to Lakshya Sen of India, a player who had been in an All England final before, and a player who'd been in a World Championship semi-final before, helped India win a Thomas Cup, won numerous other titles, was always going to be a difficult opener for Xiu-Chi, and he was unable to defeat Lakshya Sen. Now, that is something I said that wouldn't be all too surprising if it happened. I will get onto Lakshya Sen later. Don't worry, Indian fans, if you're watching this, I'm not brushing over his fantastic performance. There's plenty to talk about when it comes to Lakshya Sen, but let's stick to Xiu-Chi. Like I said, I wasn't going to be too surprised if he was to lose to Lakshya. You know, he's a former top player. I've already gone through some of the things that he has achieved. It was a fantastic match, very close, 3 games, played at a great physical pace. I don't think Xiu-Chi was at 100%, but he was pretty close. Actually, having said that, I can now recall an interview, I think, with the CKU before the event. CK did a number of interviews where he was walking around the arena, and I think Xiu-Chi mentioned there that he hadn't had too much training time in the build-up to this All England, but still, based on what I saw, he looked in pretty good nick. I think what edged it for Lakshya Sen was that he was just that little bit faster, a little bit more aggressive. He really took his chances from the mid-court forward. That was an area, I think, throughout the entirety of the game that he was really, really good. But in the final half of the third, I felt that what Lakshya did was he played the net incredibly well. Super sharp and super tight. And I just felt again, overall, he sustained pressure for longer. I think both these players let their opponents off the hook at times, but Lakshya did so less. I think Shetty did struggle. Maybe it was that slight lack of practice, who knows? But he struggled to sustain pressure for long periods throughout the match, whereas Lakshya Sen, I thought, looked in great physical shape. Especially in the first round, he was obviously full of energy, and he used a lot of that. I think on top of that, just quickly about Lakshya, I think what also added to this was that when he was in his rear court, he used a lot of little slices and angle changes. He never allowed Shetty to really settle into his defense too well, and then he followed it up really, really positively. But yeah, no, Shetty, the #1 seed and defending champion, out in the first round. And I think if I recall rightly, from something Jill Clark said, this is the first time that has happened, that the defending champion of first and top seed has gone out in the first round. I know we've seen top seeds and defending champions go out in the second round. I can remember Victor Axelsen doing so a couple of years ago, but not so in the first round. My next pick in the top half was Alex Lanier, and he also lost in the first round, although it must be said it was incredibly tight against Victor Lai. Victor Lai being another player who had a great tournament where he reached the semi-finals, losing to Lakshya Sen in probably the most epic match of the entire tournament. There were some questions again, like with Lakshya, on Victor Lai later, so I'll come back to that then. Yes, in this match, it did end 23-21 in the third game to Victor. Now, maybe it was pressure of being seeded this year. As we know, Alex Lanier did make the semi-finals last year, but he did so from an unseeded position. So maybe the fact that he probably wanted to replicate that, the All England is super special, it's so prestigious, and now being seeded, maybe the pressure just fell on Alex. Add that to the fact that he was drawn against Victor Lai, who is a player that's new to the scene, but has made a huge splash, reaching the semi-finals, the World Championships last year. He also reached the semi-finals, the India Open earlier this year, and is a very difficult player to play against. Maybe all of this just, put a little bit too much pressure on Alex Lanier. It certainly came across, I felt, in the way that he played. Now, in all first rounds, not many players are going to be playing super relaxed and settled. You're going to see nerves, you're going to see tension, you're going to see some bitty patches. But I felt overall, this match between two great players, whilst it was close and certainly had drama because of that, I don't think it was a particularly amazing match to watch. I thought it was actually a little bit scrappy. I think both were tight and nervous. They probably knew that both had a great chance to win and to potentially, if they get through, have a good run in the tournament. Now, of course, there was some good stuff, but I thought overall it was a little bit scrappy. For Alex, I felt he never really found his width. He hit narrow quite a lot, nor did he really find his rhythm. It seemed he was trying to get through that match through his physicality, through his hard work. And it almost worked out, but yes, wasn't able to be this time around. Still plenty, I think, for Alex Lanier. I think he's still very young. We know what he's capable of, and I'm sure he'll bounce back even stronger from this foot. But for him, lots of lessons to be learnt. My next pick also didn't go well for me. This has not been a good start to my predictions. Jonathan Christie. Now, with Christie, he won his opening round against Jason Teh of Singapore, but I wrote in my notes right after finishing watching that match that I said, if he plays like that, he can't win the tournament. For me, it was still, I've criticised Christie in the past that when, and I think I even said this in a previous video, that when I feel that he's not playing particularly well is when I see him just doing drops and clears. A very old school way of playing badminton. And I felt I saw far too much of that again. I know the conditions in the hall were slow, and we saw a lot of long matches, especially in the men's singles. Lots of long drawn-out matches, but in those ones, the players that played well were able to still utilise attack. And the fact that the whole tournament was won by a player that had the best attack in the game showed that attacking certainly was the way forward. And I feel like Christie, he's really good in the flat game. He has a hard smash, and using both of those combined with his clears and drops would have been a great effective way to play. And I feel that when he is playing his best badminton, that's exactly what he does. And again, I just don't think he used any of that. And when I saw that he was drawn up against Lin Chunyi, who I've just mentioned, who has a phenomenal attack, I just felt that honestly, if Christie played the way he did against Jason Teh, while Jason Teh's attack is good, Lin Chunyi's is probably the best in men's singles right now. And if he gave away too many chances, Lin Chunyi would not let him off. And that's precisely what happened in their second round match. And then rounding out my 4 picks was Kunlavut, and he did get to the semi-finals. So this is my first correct prediction. Now, Kunlavut before the tournament had said he was extra motivated to do well, to win, in fact, to be more precise, as this was probably one of those, the All England is one of the tournaments that he desperately wants to win. And he felt that this was probably his last chance in a couple of years, I think is what he had said, because of by next year, not only is the tournament going to be longer, I think by 1 round for men's singles, but it's definitely drawn over more days, which personally I think might actually help Kunlavut, but it's the fact that it's going to go down to a 3 to 15 scoring system. So we'll probably heavily favour, especially in the early adoptions of it, and I think the All England might be one of the earlier tournaments to have the 3 to 15 system, will obviously favour the more attacking players, the kind of players that Kunlavut does struggle against. So I think Kunlavut saw that this was a great opportunity for him to do well, and he did do well because he reached the semi-finals. He'd never been into even a quarter-final before at the All England. Who did he lose to in the end? It was against Lin Chunyi. But before I get to quickly talking about that, I think it was quite clear when I was watching that all the pressure that Kunlavut had put on himself, or the expectations, or the desire to want to win, it was quite clear. Obviously, Xiu Qi lost early, a player that beat Kunlavut in the world final, and I think being the second seed, once he saw Xiu Qi out, I think he probably thought, oh wow, my chances have gone up even higher. Although there's still plenty of amazing players in the draw, seeing a player like Xiu Qi go out must have given him a boost, going, ooh, maybe this is my year. Because in the second round when he played against Thoma Jr. Popov, he looked very tense and very nervous, and I felt Thoma Jr. actually kind of noticed that and applied a lot of pressure, using his height really well, attacking well, jumping onto the flat shots, just pushing up early onto the court, onto the front court, and just made life very difficult for Kunlavut. But obviously Kunlavut was able to come through that, was able to settle his nerves. I think on the second end he got a slightly favourable end for him, and that was he was able to kind of settle himself and come out. And then I felt that in the quarterfinal, I was actually up there on the quarterfinal day, and I saw a bit of Kunlavut versus Ali Farhan, and he did look far more composed and relaxed. I felt that could have been a tricky match because of the way that Ali Farhan plays. He was playing very well. He beat Cho Chin Chen in the second round, playing a very good game, very composed, but also using his speed and his attack. And I felt that speed and attack might be something that Kunlavut would find difficult. We've seen Ali Farhan push Kunlavut close. Again, I've already mentioned like the World Championships, but Farhan pushed him to 3 games at those World Championships using the similar style. But I felt Kunlavut was much more relaxed, might be the right word, I don't know, but it was definitely more focused. He looked a bit more serious on court. He was really, probably now he's in the business end. He's got to the best stage he's ever done. He was like, right, this is my chance, and he really pushed it. But in the semi-finals, he had a great match against Lin Chunyi. It was 3 games, but the attacking play of Lin Chunyi was just that little bit too much. In that third game, though, I think he was 16-10 down, and then he got it, or 16-11. He got it back to 16-all, and at that stage, I was like, oh, Kunlavut, like, this is it. I thought that with the fact that he has more experience, that Lin Chunyi just lost 5 points in a row and maybe lost that opportunity to make it to an All England final. I thought Kunlavut, and plus the way that Kunlavut was playing, he was looking really, really focused. He was attacking that a little bit more. He was taking his chances. I thought, okay, this is it. And Lin Chunyi started to tense up, but then Lin Chunyi just pulled off 5 straight points himself again. Something that he did numerous times throughout this tournament. So yeah, Kunlavut did provide me with a point on my predictions, but I do think Looking ahead for Kunlova, I know this has been mentioned a few times. I know that when he was playing in the Malaysia Open, there was a lot of news articles about the advice he'd been given by Lee Chong-wei, a former world number one, and we don't need to go through his accolades. I'll be here all day. But he had said that Kunlova needs to be a little bit more attacking, a little bit more aggressive in his play, not relying too heavily on his not retrieval skills, but his neutralizing skills. Kunlova is known for having a really solid defense, and it is good, but it's not like he's a great natural defender. I think he reads the game very well. He has great anticipation skills, and it's his racket skills that allow him to kind of defend as well as we see. I think someone like a Lakshya Sen, or there's a couple others that I think have Kodai have better natural defensive skills because they're just that little bit quicker on their feet. But I think for Kunlova to continue to improve, I do think he needs to, and I mean this nicely, lose a little bit of weight. I don't think he's ever going to be one of those guys that takes a shirt off and he's going to have like the ripped six-pack, but he definitely could do with just trimming up a little bit, especially with the scoring system going to 315, which is going to favour faster players, especially at the start. I think Kunlova could just improve his physical conditioning a little bit. I think he's got a pretty good engine on him, and he can do well in long games, in long matches, because of his shot skills and his shot quality and his racket skills. Sorry, but I think it's going to be, with the new scoring system change, it will be harder for him to neutralize players down. Obviously, he's still got plenty of other weapons and tools in his toolbox, but I think physically he certainly needs to just improve that a little bit, and I'm sure that he knows that. And lastly, my dark horse for the men's singles proved to be the right choice. I did pick Lin Chunyi, and he won the whole tournament, becoming the first player from Chinese Taipei to win the men's singles at the All England. He almost became the first male player to win, but unfortunately, due to the scheduling, his teammate, Hong Wei, in the mixed doubles, took that accolade from him. But more on that guy a little later. I think with Lin, before I kind of like, I'm not going to sit here and sing my praises and go, oh, what an amazing dark horse pick for me, because I also have to admit, and I said this out loud, I could have easily closed my eyes, run my fingers up and down, opened it, and there's a good chance that whoever I was pointing at could have been the champion. I think Jill Clark and Steen Pedersen said that looking at the 8 players that made the quarterfinals, all of them could have won the tournament, and that I think that extends pretty much throughout the whole draw. There's a few players that, yes, of course, but probably on the lower side, but easily half, if not 2/3 of that draw, realistically, if they had the kind of week we all know they're capable of, could have been sat there as the All England champion. But this week was Lin Chunyi, and I think one phrase, the top thing here on my notes that stands out, what a crazy attack that guy has. He always has. I can remember when I first saw him, I think Thailand Masters or Thailand Open a few years ago, when he won the tournament, and I pointed out that the guy had a phenomenal attack back then, and it's only got better. He probably has the best attack in men's singles right now, and when in full flow like it was throughout this tournament, it's incredibly hard to defend against. From both sides, forehand and round the head, he's got the straight and the cross. His best one is certainly that round the head cross court. That won him so many points. But I think on top of this great attack, I think what you can't just win All England with just having a great smash. You can't just have one area be absolutely amazing and win a title like the All England. I think he actually is brilliant and has fantastic other areas. His speed, his footwork is really locked in. There isn't many wasted steps. His retrieval skills were sublime. He's able to pick up a number of shuttles and then leap up and then be ready for the next shot. I think he has the ability to play sharp and deceptive shots from above and below the tape. Sometimes we see players that can have great skills when they're in above the shuttle in a really good position, but when they're below, they can only really play the basics. Lin Chunyi can still apply pressure to his opponents from below tape, even sometimes throughout this tournament from almost off the floor. He can still hold players and create opportunities for himself, which just makes things very, very difficult, because obviously if a player's got a great attack like Lin Chunyi, the counter to that is you take the front court, or you put him into slightly defensive positions where he can't create an advantage from the front to create that rear court opportunity. But Lin Chunyi, even when some players were getting him in those ones, he could still turn it around in almost a blink of an eye. And then if you're slightly late and you're lifting up to him, very difficult to get yourself out of that hole. And when I see him play like he did throughout this All England, it makes you think that he really should be a top 4 player, but he isn't. I'm not quite sure where his ranking is. I think it's just outside the top 10. I think with these points from the All England, he'll probably move inside the top 10. But maybe we are starting to see the rise of him into that position, because he won the India Open, and now he's just won the All England Open. But I think we do need to see a little bit more of a consistent one. I think if there's one knock on Lin Chunyi, and maybe this explains why he's not higher ranked. We see it. I saw it in patches at this All England. Is that he would have a number of times where he'd have a low patch, and I don't mean that he's obviously, if you're an attacking player like that, you can't just go all out from start to finish. I think a player's defenses are too strong, and you're just going to blow yourself out. You need to be sensible with it. So this isn't me saying that he was just going through those. It looked like he just, when he was playing a little bit slower or more conservative, it wasn't as good, or he'd have patches where it just, a few errors would come in, or he just was doing not a lot with the shuttle. I think everyone can have those, but I think they went on for a little bit too long. And he did it in the quarterfinals against Christo Popov, in the semis against Kunlevert, and also in the final against Lakshya Sen in that second game at the start. In that final, he let Lakshya get a little bit too far away. He was able to peg it in, but he almost let that game go away from him. I think it is impressive. He could still deliver with those lapses, but I think those kind of lapses might come to bite him in certain situations. Personally, I think when it comes to the final, I think had Lakshya Sen been a little fresher, he went into that final incredibly exhausted, especially after his titanic effort, where he finished suffering with cramps and really struggling against Victor Lai in the semis. I think had Lakshya been a little fresher, he might have been able to capitalise on this more and could have won. Because I think Lakshya, especially compared to Kunlevert, I think he has a few key things that could have capitalised a little bit more on one of those lapses. I think Lakshya has a little bit more speed in his retrieval skills. He's very good at neutralising, a bit like Kunlevert, with the high clears and the clever blocks. But I think also he has those angle changes, very unorthodox. Like if you feel you've got him, you can just turn it away. Something that he did very good. And I think where he's better than Kunlevert is his flat game. And he has a little bit sharper attack. And I think those things, I think had he just had the legs to be able to play the extended long rallies on top of that, I think that could have been very difficult for Lin Chunyi. That's not to say that I'm not saying here that a fresh Lakshya would have won the final. I still think it would have been incredibly close, but it would have certainly been very, very interesting. I don't think Lin Chunyi would have got away with that lapse at the beginning of the second game. I think Lakshya would have hammered that home, and then it would have gone to the third, and who knows. But I think the last thing I'll say, I think there's been quite a few comparisons with Lin Chunyi and Lin Dan. I can certainly see them. He's certainly got that vibe. Obviously a great attack, left-handed. I think the way that he plays his forehand front court is almost identical. I also think he has some set pieces that are like it. He loves the round the head cross clear, because then that opens out to his forehand, which then he can then turn you off, or he can play other shots away. I think that is very similar. Obviously some of his attacking play, the way that he gets up to the shuttle, reminds me a little bit of Lin Dan as well. But yeah, I think if he does want to push into top 4 and be consistently winning these big events, I think another thing he needs to try and take from Lin Dan is his mental approach. Something that Lin Dan was so good at, and only got better as he got older, was that if he couldn't play at his top speed, when he had to play the kind of the basic game and go through a few points like that, he still didn't give away too many runs or patches. He was still able to kind of do things with the shuttle and still apply pressure to the other side. I feel like when Lin Chunyi is not like at his 80 to 100% game, there's a big chance for opponents to get in there. Here he was able to close those gaps with his phenomenal attack, but I think that's not always going to work. So I think when he has those low patches, or when his opponent's defense or whatever is able to counter him a little bit, what does he do then? I think that's going to be quite an interesting development for Lin Chenyi moving forward. He'll certainly have more people trying to analyse his game and find ways to neutralise that huge attack of his. But that is the men's singles. Overall, 2 out of 5, so not a particularly good start for me. Let's move on to the women's singles. I did a bit better here, but it was a little easier to predict. When it comes to the women's events, women's singles, women's doubles, by the semi-finals, all top 4 seeds were in. It was 1v, 1v3 or 4 and 2v3 and 4. All 4 seeds, the top seeds in the world, were all in the semi-finals. So, An Se-young, she made it to the semi-finals pretty much untouched and unscathed. The slower hall conditions, I felt, obviously, were going to make her very difficult to beat. I think to defeat her, you're going to have a certain level of physicality. And she didn't win this tournament. It was Wang Ziyi who did bring a very good level of physicality in that final. But in the semi-final where she played Chen Yufei, it was the physicality that did actually kind of decide the match. Chen Yufei kind of ran out of legs after the first game. That's not the only factor. I think An Se-young kind of took the first game to get into her stride. She was certainly a little bit nervous, a little bit wary of Chen Yufei. She always knows that Chen Yufei is a difficult opponent to play. I think Chen Yufei has certainly developed some attacking options and does a little bit more with the shuttle. And I think she went for her a little bit more, went for An Se-young, but An Se-young was able to kind of weather the storm. And I think physically, in the end, it was that. I think Chen Yufei just couldn't maintain it. Of course, I think most people will remember this tournament because An Se-young didn't win. I'll get to the final in a second. But while she didn't win, I think I'm still seeing improvements in An Se-young's game. I think her movement, it's always been a strong point of hers, but I think her movement, especially to the rear court, is a lot more explosive. She's getting up off the ground and onto the shuttles far more. So before, I'd see she would always kind of like to the back, stay on the ground and play a very safe shot and then come forward. And just there's a lot of rallies where she's doing that, especially at the All England where the conditions are a little slower. Here she's getting up to the shuttle and playing the same shots but from a much higher position. So she's looking to kind of get off the ground, be a little bit more proactive, a bit more aggressive with her general play from the rear of the court. Now that's going to obviously take physically a bit more of a toll. So she's going to have to continue to develop her physicality to be able to deal with that. But I think that's certainly something I think Park Ju-bong had mentioned. I remember him saying something about that last year. Obviously with Lee Hyun-il as the coach, someone who is known for his footwork. I think you can see the influence of him in the way that An Se-young's playing. So I think her follow-ups in general, I've mentioned that a few times, are still getting better. And so too is her flat game. Her performance in the final wasn't her best, but I'd say that was mainly due to the way that her opponent Wang Ziyi played. But her performances elsewhere in this tournament were really good. And like I said, whilst most people will go, well, An Se-young lost, that's the main story when it comes to talking about the women's singles discipline, I think it's important to note that I did notice some improvement still in the An Se-young game. Moving on, Chen Yufei was my next pick, and she also reached semi-finals, so that's 2 from 2 already. I think, like I've already mentioned, in the semi-final with An Se-young, she simply wasn't physically good enough. I think whilst it wasn't visibly noticeable right away, both players do move so well and so smoothly. It's a bit like when you watch a really good runner, it's sometimes hard to realise they're running at like 2:50 per kilometre pace, which is just not human, but they make it look so easy. These two move around the badminton court in the same way. If you watch it on TV, it looks like they're not really, it looks like it's almost effortless, but when you're down by the court side, you can, and not that I ever moved that well, but I know how hard it is to make movement. Anything that at that level that's made to look that easy is incredibly difficult and is taxing the body really hard, even if it isn't particularly visible. And I think just the sheer effort that required to play at the pace to beat An Se-young was just too much. She wasn't able to sustain it. I don't think, maybe she isn't 100%. She still has a lot of taping on her legs, but it seems to be moving in the right direction. And I'll be very interested to see these two play matches later in the year. If we get to see that, maybe at the... I don't think we'll see it at the Uber Cup, because I think she'll play Wang Ziyi. Wang Ziyi will be top player for China. But maybe we could see a rematch at the World Championships and even possibly the Asian Games later in the year. It's going to be quite interesting because I think Chen Yufei showing the right tactics that can trouble that first game, put a lot of pressure onto Young, just wasn't able to sustain it. So yeah, a good tournament for her. I think she'll be pretty happy with the way that she's progressing, following the fact that she wasn't even able to compete with Young earlier in the year at the Malaysia Open in their semi-final then. Moving on, Ratchnok was my next pick. I thought that she would be the one to come through there. She was seeded, and I thought Yamaguchi wouldn't. There's question marks over her fitness, and those questions were kind of answered. She actually played pretty well. Yamaguchi was the player to come to the semi-finals. And sadly for Ratchnok, actually, it was her that had to withdraw as her knee is still not 100%. In her match against Ye Xiaomin, she won the first game, and then she did, I noticed very early on the second, a couple of deep lunges that she just didn't look comfortable with. And I think she did the sensible thing and withdrew. But as always, she seems positive with where she is and where she wants to go. I do hope she can get back to 100% soon, as not only is she great to watch, but in the Uber Cup, Thailand will definitely need her if they wish to do well. And I think Thailand are always a team that are dangerous. They'll be hoping for a medal, and I think if without Ratchnok, that medal hope will be very, very difficult. And lastly, Wang Ziyi. So Wang Ziyi was the second seed. She won the whole tournament. Obviously, as I mentioned, she did beat Seong in the final. But in all honesty, apart from the final, her level wasn't overly that impressive. I think even I heard Steen Pedersen say that in the lead up or in the early stages of her semi-final with Akane Yamaguchi. But I must admit, I think me and Steen there are holding her to very, very high standards. She still, I think, came through the tournament without dropping, came through to the final with only dropping one game to Tomoka Miyazaki in the quarterfinals. But like I said, in the final, it was like she was a completely different player. She had lost 10 previous matches to Seong, including that heartbreaking final last year at the All England. So for her to kind of win, to kind of keep going in there, she's had some heartbreaking losses. We've seen her crying after a few times losing in some epic battles to Seong. I think the tears were flowing after the one in the World Tour Finals, which was a bit similar, whereas an epically long game where they both ended up physically completely drained, especially Seong ending up with cramps. So the fact that she kept coming back, she kept believing, and I think that was one thing she said in her post-match interview, was that the most important thing was to keep believing in herself, and all that self-belief paid off as she was able to win her first All England title. Now, I think with Seong losing, having been so dominant, always, like I said, always going to be the thing that grabs the headlines. And I think a lot of people might chalk this up to, like, was Seong playing poorly, or was she unwell, or all these kind of things. And I think, personally, this win was more Wang Ziyi playing well than Seong playing poorly. She did, Seong, give away a number of a lot of errors, some that on the surface would seem unforced. But I think Steen said this, and I was definitely in agreement, that whilst the mistakes that she made, if you just took them at face value, were unforced. They weren't like from a really bad position. There was a few wild smashes or cross nets that were going out. I think it was because of one thing that Wang Ziyi did well. She did a number of things, but one main one was her retrieval skills were absolutely out of this world in that final. She chased down every single shuttle, and she didn't just get the shuttle back, she tended to get it back with interest. Even when she was scraping for floor, she was able to put some deception in, she was able to sometimes clip the net. There was a number of rallies where it felt like Seong had to win the rally 3, 4, even 5 times. And I think, if a player is doing that to you, then you end up feeling like you've got to go that little bit tighter to the lines. And of course, that's when errors start to happen. So whilst you could deem them unforced, they were forced by the sheer pressure of Wang Ziyi's retrieval skills. I think that was one thing. I also thought that Wang Ziyi's length in general throughout the whole final was absolutely fantastic. If you watch Seong, most of the time her feet are landing in the back box. So she wasn't getting too many opportunities to kind of create winning chances. She did try really hard to do so, but then Wang Ziyi's defense was up to the task. And also, on top of this, I felt that when Seong did attack and Wang Ziyi was in a pretty good position to defend, she was consistently, and I think that's a key word, consistently bring An Se-young all the way forward. If you then again watch, I said, if you watch An Se-young's feet landing in the back at the back, whenever she's lunging at the front, almost her foot's on the front line. That shows you how far forward she's having to move, and that's something that's super important. I've, throughout many other matches, and again, I'm going to use Steen again because he's very, very insightful. But he's always said to defeat An Se-young, it's about, can you consistently apply that little bit of pressure to get a little bit ahead in the rally and continue to do shot after shot after shot, where you're maybe, if we took it as like, if a rally's even, you call it 50-50. If you start at 50-50, you go 51-49, 52, 53, 54. It's rare that against An Se-young you can jump 10-15% at a time. And I just felt that Wang Ziyi consistently bringing An Se-young forward just applied that pressure and just allowed Wang Ziyi to keep just getting ahead. And on top of that, it was physically knocking An Se-young. She was bent over double a few times. And I think that's why I think it's sometimes when you watch it, people could say, oh, maybe An Se-young was unwell or something was going on. And maybe that is the case. Again, I don't 100% know. I don't want to kind of rule it out and just say, yeah, An Se-young was 100%. Maybe there was something. But for me, when you watch it, if you compare it to other matches these two have had, I thought the consistency of Wang Ziyi's length, coupled with how tight she brought An Se-young in a lot, and then add to that the retrieval, so the rallies were going on, those three things physically were going to take a huge toll on An Se-young. So it's not surprising that even though this was 2 games, it was a physically demanding match. On top of all of this, I felt that Wang Ziyi attacked well, which was always something, always a strength for hers that gave her... There's always something mentioned when she'd beaten An Se-young before, that she had that little bit more firepower than other players. I think, but a big thing I think that stood out huge was her mental strength and composure, as we've seen her collapse a few times against An Se-young in their matches, but this time, and it seemed maybe at 2016, then it got to 2019, I'm sure she was feeling a little bit, but she was able to see it out, and I thought it was quite fitting that she saw it out with an attacking shot as well. She wasn't letting An Se-young lose it for her, she was going to go out and try to win it, and I thought that was a really good approach. And I think lastly, and I know someone mentioned this on my Instagram post, that I noticed that Wang Ziyi wasn't as expressive. I think she was like, right, let's just internalize everything. Let's stay. There was a couple of fist pumps at times, but generally speaking, as she was getting that lead, and you could probably inside she was probably super like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. But outside, she just gave off this. She was just trying to go, right, no, this has happened before. Let's take it point by point, and I thought she did that really well, and it deserves a lot of credit. There's a lot of things that I think deserve a lot of credit, and I think it's good for the sport that we've seen An Se-young lose. It's always nice, someone a bit different, or it's a bit like when we saw, and again, I think what we could see in the future for these two playing is could be similar to a Lindan Lee Chong Wei situation. I still think currently An Se-young's going to win the majority. She could be the Lindan character, but I think obviously Wang Ziyi is still more than capable of getting these odd wins. And I do think actually this win at the All England will certainly give her a much needed confidence for the big events later in the year. The Uber Cup, they're going to probably play each other, most likely in a semi-final or a final, the World Championships and the Asian Games. So, I think winning and beating An Se-young would give her a huge amount of confidence, but even more so the fact that it happened at the All England is massive for the big tournaments, because it's a huge year, especially for the Asian athletes, with 3 more major competitions. So, yeah. I think that's everything I really want to say on that. And obviously, of course, rounding out my dark horse, Michelle Lee, very quickly. She had a great opening win against Gao Fangji, but then lost to Pompoi Chochawong, who I felt actually had a really good tournament. So overall, women's singles, 3 out of 5. Not too bad. Moving on, men's doubles. So my top, Kim Won-ho and Seo Seung-jae, they were a quite obvious pick. They won the whole tournament defending their title. And I think the best way I can describe this pair is actually using kind of the words of Rexy Meineke, Malaysia's head coach, who said in an interview with CK before the tournament, That what really makes them stand out is just how calm they are in a crisis. They don't panic, even when things are maybe not quite going their way, or their opponents are playing really well, or whatever the situation. They find a way to just kind of settle the storm, calm it down, and find a way to win. And they did it in a few ways throughout this tournament. You know, in the quarterfinals, they played the Popovs brothers, who were playing out of their skin, were simply inspired, but they steadied the ship and won the war of attrition. Against Indra and Joaquin, the young Indonesian pair, you know, who came out absolutely flying, having a great tournament. The Koreans did enough to win the opening game, and then in the second, they completely sucked the speed out of the game, giving the Indonesians nothing to work with. In the second, the Indonesians could barely get onto the attack. The soft touches, the defences and blocks really opened up the court. And then in the final against Arancha and Sohiyik, it was an amazing final, incredibly close. But the Koreans knew that they could do well from the far end and just kept things tight enough in the opening of that third. Just to, I think, give that a little bit of doubt into the Malaysians. And that was quite deciding. Like their semi-final, I felt in that final, their net game was exceptional. They took out speed, blocked a lot off their defensive shots, and also spotted gaps over the top. I must admit the Koreans are acutely aware of tactical situations. Throughout the tournament, I think Jill Clark couldn't stop praising Seo Jae for finding gaps that pretty much no one else could find. But I think in the final, there's one specific example, was right at the end. I think it was at 17-16. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Seo Jae again. Did the flick to Sohiyik. Because 3 times from that odd box, they had slow served to Sohiyik pretty much straight to the forehand, and he 3 times just dived in and just went all in. They had to go all in on the service situation. He did it 3 times and won literally 3 points from that service situation. And when I was watching it, I turned to my wife and said, they need to flick Sohiyik, or they need to serve away from his forehand. They can't do that serve again, because he keeps jumping on it. And then that flick, although Sohiyik dealt with it really well, and the rally did go on, the Koreans won it. And then actually the next time, I think at 19-17, again to Sohiyik, the low serve came into his forehand, but he was a little bit later on it because of that flick. And it just shows you sometimes how little things like that can have such an impact on a game. But again, just because he was fraction lower to it, it allowed the Koreans in. And from that side of the court, once they were kind of out of that early pressure situation, where in a serve situation many things can happen really quickly, once the game opens out, the Koreans were so strong from that side of the court. So like I said, it was that kind of calmness under pressure. I think the last thing I'll say, because I will talk about the final, there's a few other things to say, but I'll save it for when I talk about Arancha and Sohiyik, is I think generally both Koreans were playing well. I rarely got the sense that they were feeling the pressure. You know, outwardly, I said that about Wang Ziyi. Internally, it probably was all rattling, all going off. But outside, I've mentioned Kim Won-ho as cool as ice, but I thought Seo Jae this week. Not once did I feel that he was playing poorly, or like that he was feeling it. He was just steady as a rock, just finding spaces, just, you know, if pairs are pressing on them, you know, just, yeah, of course, there was moments, Arancha and Sohiyik especially were able to apply a lot of pressure from the far end of the court, but they felt super steady, like, super steady, just, even in, like, every single match I watched of theirs, it just felt that they weren't going to lose. They just got that kind of aura about them. Moving on, my next pick was Alfian and Fikri, and they lost in the second round for a 3rd time in a row to their younger compatriots, Indra and Joaquin. Now, I did consider those young Indonesians as dark horses, but I wasn't sure how they'd handle the pressure of the All England, but we got our answer. Someone has asked me about them a bit later, so I'll talk about them there. For Alfian and Fikri, they'll probably be a little bit disappointed. And I think what's interesting in the fact that they've lost 3 times to that pair is in 3 completely different halls. All England, slow. They lost to them at the Astora, where it's fast and drifty. And then they also lost to them in Australia, where I think it's pretty neutral. So yeah, no, not a good tournament for Alfian and Fikri. But they did do a bit better than my next pick, which was Rankireddy and Shetty. They lost in the first round to another young, talented pair, Malaysian pair of Arantai and Kang Xing, the 2024 World Junior Champions. I really do love this Malaysian pair. I think they've got a very bright future. And I think in this match, Their speed and attack completely overwhelmed the Indians. The defense really wasn't there. The Indians' defense wasn't able to hold up. It did seem, I made a comment that I think Aaron Tai was covering 1.5 courts. He was just zipping around. I've never seen anyone move that quickly in a long time. So yeah, the Indians' defense was quite easily broken down. I think another area where the Malaysians dominated the match was the service situation. The Indians were struggling with both players' serves, especially Aaron Tai. He has got a very good spin serve. He almost comes from under it. Like, he holds the shuttle under the racket, which is a bit unique. And he kind of does that, and it really does tumble. It's probably one of the best tumble serves in men's doubles at the moment. And yeah, the Indians were just, especially in the second game, were just on the back foot the whole time. So yeah, they didn't... I think the last thing I'll say about Rankireddy and Shetty, it was difficult. They were playing against a very inspired pair. Maybe they didn't have too much information on them, but it didn't seem like they had a backup plan for this match. Once they lost that first game, they were really unable to turn it around. But very impressive performance by the Malaysians, especially given it was their first All England. And at the bottom, we're back to Aaron Chai and Sowiek. I spoke a bit about them in the fact that they reached the final. So my jinx isn't true. I did say maybe picking them would have jinxed them, but no, they played a really good tournament. And it just showed that the fact they were able to get to the final, that means sometimes you can't look at previous results too much, because in their last 2 tournaments, they'd lost pretty badly in Germany. I can't remember who they lost to. Or who was it? I think it was the French pair that did reach the final. And then Indonesian Masters, they'd lost to Lunggol and Bestagor, I think. I mean, the Indonesian Master won because it was the end of 3 tournaments in a row, fatigue. And I think in the German Open, I had heard, I did a TikTok live BWF, and we had Sean Bendy and Ben Lane on, and they know that Aaron and So were training through that tournament. They were training very, very hard for the All England, so maybe they just weren't peaking. Their main focus was the All England, and clearly it paid off. Whatever the plan was, it worked, because they did have a very good tournament. Their semi-finals and final, really good. You can see the Hairy IP influence. The kind of... For me, obviously, I think there's 2 things to this. One is Sowiek has certainly improved his front court. I've mentioned this before, but that just gives them more options. You know, they're not only effective when Aaron Char's at the front, they're effective in both ways. In fact, I think Sowiek has almost caught up with Aaron Char in terms of his ability. They play differently, of course, but his reading of the game and things that he was creating from the front were absolutely exceptional. But where really, especially in the semi-final and when they were the far end in the final, it's their lateral movement across. You know, the cross attacks. They were kind of linking up really well. Before, I always felt they were a little bit more of a linear pair, like kind of classic front back. You smash a bit more to the centre, you try to get the flat shot through the centre, and that's where you can intercept. But here, they're almost kind of like attacking, and then the front player is then coming back and leaping out. So they're kind of rotating laterally one another. They're kind of the speed from side to side with both of them. It's not just one player moving around the back. They're both working together like this. Very Indonesian approach to the men's doubles is what you see Indra and Joaquin doing fucking phenomenally. But I feel Aaron Chai and Sowiek did that. I mean, the semi-final, they absolutely blew away the Chinese pair when they were doing that. The thing that got the Chinese pair to that semi-final and also won the German Open was just how solid their defense was. And Aaron Chai and Sowiek were breaking down that defense like it was nothing. It was like a hot knife through butter. I think in the final, they also showed that, especially when they were in that far end, they were almost untouchable. The Koreans really struggled to deal with it, but they did enough to keep it close. And even in the first game, they were almost close to winning it. It's just, I just don't think they just couldn't find a solution when they were playing the nearer end. Now, I think in the third game, they did go in with the lead. They probably did need a couple more points lead to really kind of hammer home that advantage. But you could see in the third, they did try to do one thing slightly different to the second game, and that was obviously rush onto the service situation, but also push up the court as much as possible. But the Koreans were so good there at either finding a gap or using a well-placed drive that just kind of made it really difficult for the Malaysians to kind of to do anything with it. Now, I do think that probably last night and this morning, Sowiek's social medias were probably blowing up with a lot of people throwing a lot of hate his way, because in the final stages, it was him that was making the vast majority of the mistakes. And whilst that is true, I think that there's a reason for that, and I do think he was, out of him and Aaron, the one who was trying to do more. He was the one that's trying to push up the front court as much as possible. And I think when you do that, when you push forward more, step into the shuttle, it will naturally lead itself to more mistakes. He did miss a few. Like, there was that round there jump out that he smashed it onto the ground. Granted, bit of pressure. Yes, he did lose his nerve a little bit, but also on top of that, I think a number of his mistakes were because he was trying to do the right things, but it was just very difficult. The Koreans were just so good in that area. I think if the Malaysians were to win, they did need to be up by a few more points going into the change of ends. But yeah, that was a fantastic final, and I think a really good tournament by Rankireddy Soviet. Unfortunately, it is their 8th Super 1000 final that they've finished runner-up. 3rd All England final runner-up. Yeah, that's got to hurt. That's going to sting a bit. But if they keep playing this way, I think they're going to have more opportunities in the future. And lastly, my dark horses. I did pick 2 in the men's doubles. I picked Chen Boyang and Liu Yi. They did reach the semi-finals. And like I said, it was their defense. It was super solid in Germany that they showed again in All England. But just when they came up against Rankireddy Soviet, they could not they couldn't maintain their defense. And I think, unlike the Koreans, the Chinese couldn't blend the fast play with the controlled defenses and pushes. I think that's important. I think Chinese style is a little bit, it's usually fight fire with fire, and sometimes that can be really good, but I think they needed, that Chinese pair needed to do a bit of the softer play, the stuff that the Koreans did so well in the final. But to be fair, the Malaysians were very hot to handle in that semi-final. And then for Kang and Khai, they were unfortunate in their first round. They lost to the young Indonesians that I've mentioned a couple of times. In that match, I think they struggled in the service situation, especially from one particular end. I can't remember which one it was as it was looking down. But they almost got themselves out of it. They did come back at the end of that 3rd game, and they did lose 22-20 in 3rd. But yeah, no, I think it was a service situation. Nikolaus Joaquin did a few cheeky drive serves to Ki Dongju that were pretty much aces. But whilst they did lose first round, and I still stand by my comments in my preview video and my prediction video that I think this pair is growing and improving. And I think they will be a very useful second pair for Korea in the Thomas Cup at the end of April. They're going to be absolutely key if Korea wish to do well, because we know their men's singles isn't particularly strong. They're going to rely heavily on their world number 1 pair, Kim and Seo. And obviously, Ki and Kang are going to be absolutely crucial as their second pair. They have got other options. Certainly got other options, but I think Ki and Kang, based on ranking-wise, they're going to be the key pair at second. So overall predictions, 3 out of 6, because I did pick 2 dark horses. Women's doubles. Okay. Liu Shengshu and Tang Ning. They won the whole tournament, became the first Chinese winners in 7 years since 2019. Actually, that's the same fact in the women's singles as well. And actually, them winning meant that they have completed the Super 1000 Slam. They've won all 4 tournaments that make up the Super 1000. And now, in all honesty, I only watched their final. They did have a really close semi-final against their compatriots, Zhai Fan and Zhang Shushan, where they just managed to squeak it, 22-20 in the 3rd. But I did miss that match, and I haven't had a chance to watch it back. I might do. But, yeah, I did only really watch the final. And I thought they were really solid in that final. Tan Ning can sometimes be the player to expose, but I felt she played a really, really great final. And Liu Shengshu was just doing what she does best. She is probably the best female doubles player in the world right now. Not just women's doubles, but I think if she wanted to go over to mixed doubles, she probably would do pretty well, probably dominate there as well if she had a decent partner. She is just a fantastic, brilliant badminton player. She's just got absolutely every area covered. So yeah, really not too much to say about them. They kind of came in, they'd won the first 2 tournaments of the year. They've delivered another. I think there's a few people saying, are they going to do 100% this year? It's still very early days. Lots of big tournaments with lots of pressure situations. And I think there's a number of pairs actually, that could certainly upset them on their day. They're not infallible, but they are playing really well. And they showed that in the final. My next pick was Zhai Fan and Zhang Shushan. They reached the semis. I was a little bit doubtful of them because since, like I said in my pre-video, since returning following the European leg at the end of last year, they've struggled to find their form, find their mojo. But clearly, they were able to re-find it here. Like I said, they came agonizingly close to making the final. I don't think there's not too much new to say about this pair. I think Zhang is much stronger from the rear court and Zha's front court continues to improve. I've mentioned those things in previous breakdowns. I thought the result that I thought was pretty good, a very good performance, was actually their quarterfinal against the new pair of Sayaka Hirota and Ayako Sakamoto. That was a tricky quarterfinal, and I think they did well. I think they did what they had to win there. Next pick was Baek Ha-na and Lee So-hee. Now, this pair really impressed me this week, and that's not just because they got to the final. I quite liked their approach. They weren't just going for the long, drawn-out rally style, which I think many people expected. We all know Koreans are very good in the basic game, very, very solid. And especially when it comes to women's doubles, we've seen a lot of long, drawn-out rallies. And we've seen this pair do that in the past. They've done very well in halls that are slow. They've won the All England twice. They've done very well, won twice at the World Tour Finals, which is also a slow hall. They got to the final of the World Tour Finals last year again, and obviously the final here. But whilst they are still very strong in the long, drawn-out rallies, and this certainly happened in the semi-final against the Malaysians, Pearly, Tan and Thinaah Maruthran. But in that semi-final, I felt it was the Malaysians that engaged the long, drawn-out rallies more than the Koreans. The Koreans were actually trying to play a little bit more attacking, a little bit faster, trying to engage the front court player more, trying to create things out of nothing, not just going for long, drawn-out clears. And I think the Koreans showed more of what I saw in the semi-final from the World Tour Finals, where they beat Liu Shengshu and Tan Ning. So I felt, I know they had a very good end to 2025 and a very solid start to 2026. And they're looking in really, really good shape. Lee So-hee, there was some concerns. She had her right leg heavily strapped at the beginning of the tournament, but as the tournament went on, that strapping got less and less, which is really, really good. And I thought Baek Ha-na, she looked in fantastic shape, moving much faster. One thing that really caught my eye was actually her movement to a flick serve. So, like, in the past, I've seen when she gets flicked, kind of like lurch back and then she just hit a high clear, unless it was a bad flick. Here, she put an extra chassis and was almost attacking the serve, moving much faster, more explosively. Her movement off the shuttle was really, really good. And I don't know, that sounds odd to say that a flick serve kind of like said, oh, she's in good shape, but it just kind of jumped out at me. I thought her movement off the shuttle was really good too. A bit like Kim Won-ho, she would push or drive and then step forward into the space. She was eager to get into the front court and try to create things from there. There's been a bit of criticism in the past that, or maybe for most of 2025, when she's at the front, she's just static. She's there, but not really doing much. Now she's actively searching for the shuttle. She's trying to get into those positions and doing much more with it. So I think that was really, really good to see. I do think these two have probably been put through some tough training and have probably had Park Ju-bong on them. And I think this is showing. And I think it is incredibly important if Korea wish to replicate the 2022 Yuba Cup when they won, because in that final they won both of the women's doubles matches. Now I know, just for a quick side note, Kim and Kang didn't play the All Englands, I think due to injury. Don't know any news on that. That could obviously scupper Korea's plans of trying to retain or reclaim the title. But I think the way that Baek Ha-na and Lee So-hee are playing and the form they've shown, really positive things for Korea moving forward. Iwanaga and Nakanishi were my pick in the top part of the bottom draw. Honestly, I didn't watch too many of their matches, but they lost to Kusuma and Puspitasari of Indonesia. Again, I didn't see a match, I can't comment on too much, but a great result for that Indonesian pair. It was their first time at the All England, and actually, quick side note, 7 Indonesian players on their debut at the All England made the quarterfinals. Only 2 of them made it through. That was Indra and Joaquin. Only 2 players out of those 7, but still really good. That's some positivity for Indonesia. I know there's been a bit of talk. Sorry, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but it was the first time since 2011 where no Indonesian players have been in the final, barring 2021 where they were forced to withdraw. So obviously that's not good overall, but if you're looking to the future or looking at new players coming in, it is a positive thing. Indonesia possibly are entering a slight rebuilding phase, so not all is lost. If you're an Indonesian fan, don't be too far down. And lastly, my dark horses were Igarashi and Shida. They did have a very tough first round against the second-seeded Malaysians of Pearly, Tan and Thinaah Maruthran, and it was here that Malaysians were able to reverse their Denmark Open second round result by winning in straight games. For me, this one, I didn't think Shida had a particularly great game. I still don't think this pair have great synergy together. They still feel like two individual players. It's just something that's not quite meshing. Whereas I felt the Malaysians actually looked far more energized. Maybe the slight long break. There hasn't been many tournaments since January, if any. You had the Women's Team Championships. I can't remember if Pearly and Thinaah went. I think they might have done, but they might not have played all matches. And I think that certainly helped because in the matches, even in the tournaments in January, I felt they still looked a bit tired and a little bit sluggish. They certainly looked a bit more energized at this All England. Moving forward more, leaping onto shots in the sides more. And I felt they were kind of playing the kind of stuff that was potentially given the opportunity to win the All England. There's a question about Pearly and Thinaah in the Q&A about their semi-final specifically, which I'll answer then. So overall, women's doubles, 3 out of 5. So, last event, the mixed doubles. This is where things went really completely... This is probably the most unpredictable or craziest set of results in terms of the whole All England. I know men's singles and men's doubles threw up a lot of surprises, especially the men's singles. But, in all honesty, that is less surprising because the men's singles, the men's events in general are so open. There's so many pairs that are all capable of winning that it's hard to predict. In the mixed, it was kind of hard to see it outside of the seeding positions, but we ended up having a non-seeded pair win the whole tournament. And pretty much all my picks had bad tournaments. So my top pick was Feng Yanze and Wang Dongping. They almost fell in the first round to Terry He and Gloria Wijaya, and then they did fall to the Danish pair of Vestergaard and Bush. They had a great tournament. They took their German Open final run into this All England. Now, since going out, I've seen online a fair bit of criticism aimed at Feng Yanze, with people saying that Wang Dongping can't lead the partnership alone, and also that his serves and returns weren't great either. Now, I do get this, and I know I said that Feng Yanze over recently had shown kind of the opposite of this. So I was a little bit surprised by the way that he played. I've been kind of praising him, saying that he got better at being able to handle these kind of pressured situations. I know last year the Worlds didn't go well, but in other big events, there was a lot of other matches that he did show great composure and kind of more maturity. And that old Feng Yanze did kind of show up here. I don't know, but the pressure must have got to him. I must admit, I don't think overall the Chinese team, they did come away with 2 titles, and the 3 players that won those titles had a great day on finals day. But I also have said that whilst I didn't see much of the women's doubles, I didn't think Wang Ziyi was in great shape in the lead up to that final. Overall, I think Team China weren't as sharp or in great shape as they possibly could have been. And maybe Feng Yanze is the kind of player that he needs to have a really good training block or a really good build up to a tournament to kind of feel confident in himself. So maybe when things weren't going well, the Danish pair did play really, really well, and I felt that obviously Terry He and Gloria Wijaya also played out of their skin. So Feng and Wang did come up against 2 pairs that were just on it on the day, and maybe he just didn't quite have that confidence because he hadn't had a good period leading in. I don't know. That could be completely wrong, so it's difficult to say. But Feng Yanze definitely wasn't at his best, but I don't think you can take anything away from Vestergaard and Bush, who played absolutely brilliantly. I must admit, for them, after losing the first game where I felt they had chances to win it, I thought the Chinese might run away with it. But nope, they stuck to their game plan. Their intensity was through the roof, and they came out as deserved winners. But it was certainly a surprise. Just a similar surprise was my next pick, which was the world champions Teng Jinji and Tori Wei. They lost in the first round to another Danish pair of Rasmus Espersen and Amelie Cecilie Kusk. Now, this did end 25-23 in the third, and the Malaysians almost got themselves out of danger. They were miles down in that third game, managed to get it close. I think they saved a number of match points, but they weren't quite able to close it. The Danes were able to hold on. I think throughout this match, I thought the Malaysians looked flat, and they didn't seem to have quite a clear game plan. For me, after the first game, Chen Tangji looked unsure of when to push up or when to kind of fall in behind Tori Wei. And I think in the second, they became hesitant, and a lot of movements off the shuttle, leading to a number of miscommunications. Tori Wei, usually so good at rushing the net, was not pushing forward right away, hesitating, and then going in, and that led to, again, that kind of uncertainty. There was a number of times where they not just clashed to each other, but a few shots that were left, or they weren't quite flowing together. There wasn't quite that synergy that I think when these two are playing well, they got it really, really good. I think Chen Tangji, again, when he was in returning the low serve, that kind of fed into that mixed doubles. When you return low serve, the man either stays in or he has to push back. And again, it all led to this kind of uncertainty about the way that they played. So yeah, I think that was... I'd also add that I didn't think Wei was too comfortable on her serve. I know she got faulted a few times early on, and maybe that played in her mind because then her serve did get a little bit loose. But I felt the Danes throughout the match grew in confidence, and in the third they were finding gaps and using the full court really well. I did think the reason it got close was they probably just realised what they were about to do, and things got a bit tense, and they just let the door slightly open that the Malaysians almost burst through, but they were just about to hold on. So yeah, not a great tournament for the Malaysians, but I'm sure they're going to learn from this and come back even stronger. My next pick was the one I was probably the least confident about, in all honesty, and that's because I went with Guo Jinhua and Chen Fangwei, the defending champions. Now, I did also say that maybe the pressure might get to them if they suddenly found themselves in the semi-finals as the lone Chinese representatives, and that's exactly what happened. But I don't think it was nerves that actually got to them I don't think that was the whole reason why they lost the semi-final to Tom Draquel and Delphine Delroux of France. That semi-final was a true match of two halves. In the first half, the Chinese could do no wrong, especially Chen Fangwei. And I think the French were a little bit caught off guard. The tactics that worked well against Zhang Zhengbang and Wei Yaxin in the quarters. It was kind of a clear tactic, get Wei Yaxin to the back and then push up and create that uncertainty within the Chinese pair. Against Guo and Chen, Chen's route was really strong, especially in the first, at the back of the court, very powerful, so that tactic wasn't on, and then she was just lightning at the net, making pretty much no errors. But then halfway through the second game, she made a couple, and then it was almost like all that confidence in her just completely sapped away. She missed a few, and by the end of the game, it really felt like she didn't know what to do. Her confidence completely drained. In her quarterfinal, or in their quarterfinal against the Indonesian pair, her defense, or the pair's defense, was really strong. She looked almost like you couldn't get through her, even if you were smashing from the service line. By the end of that semi-final, it looked like any attack could get through her. Every time the attack went over to her, it was like, okay, rally over. And 9 times out of 10, that was the case. And I think the way this match played out actually might kind of offer an explanation as to why we don't see Guo and Chen doing as consistently well as possibly what their skill and talent level is, because I think Guo Jinhua is exceptionally skillful and talented, and Chen Fangwei is good. And I think what I'm getting at is that when Chen Fangwei kind of went through a bit of a bad patch, suddenly she lost her game, lost her confidence. I don't think Guo Jinhua is a leader of the partnership. He's a very exuberant player, like skillful and can do all sorts of things with a shuttle. But when Chen was struggling, I don't think he can be the rock in the partnership. Now, I don't think this was helped in that semi-final by the fact that Guo Jinhua was struggling physically. Their quarter-final against the Indonesians was insanely long, and I think he was feeling that a little bit. But having said that, a number of times, when Chen Fangwei was starting to kind of really falter and struggle, that's where he needs to come in and be a little bit more solid, and he wasn't. I saw him doing some top spin lifting and almost like the opposite. He was trying to kind of do things just crazily, and maybe that is why these two struggle to consistently do well. If they're both on it, really, really good. They showed that a number of stages throughout this tournament. When one of them, especially I think if Chen's struggling a bit, like she did in that semi-final, I don't think Guo Jinhua has that ability to be the rock that's needed at those times. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether they can turn that around or work on that a little bit. I think for Guo Jinhua, I wouldn't say he needs to be a basic player. What makes him good is exactly what I said, but it's in those situations, can he tone it down to maybe give them a fighting chance? And my last pick was another Chinese pair, Zhang Zhengbang and Wei Yaxin, and they also lost to Draquel and Delroux in the quarterfinals. And this match reminded me a little bit of Zhang and Wei's final World Championship final against the Malaysians, Chen and To, the service situation was key, and the French did it brilliantly. They flicked Wei Xin, and then they jumped on the returns. If they were a little bit second best at the net, they would lift the Wei, but over to the side that Wei Xin was on, getting into the back. We know that she's got real issues with the shoulder, massive shoulder injury when she was a junior, restricting the way that she can play, so she's limited from the back. And whilst I think that this Chinese pair have done quite well to kind of work on solutions around that in this quarterfinal, they simply couldn't get themselves out of it. But not only this, but I felt Del Rue was using her soft pushes through the front player and in front of the rear player really well. I've highlighted that in a few breakdowns where they've done well. You know, I can remember a few times they played Deechpon and Subsara, and when they were doing well, it's kind of Del Rue just laying it down soft with not too much pace. And I think Zhang Zhongbang was really struggling with this, and the French were just able to get on top of the mid-court and the tape area. Yeah, the Chinese just couldn't really get into the game or find any solutions to this. The Chinese were barely allowed to play their own game. They never really attacked too much, and even when they did, the French defense could withstand it brilliantly. And in my last one, my dark horse was Jesper Toft and Amelie Magaland, and they lost to Alexander Dunn and Julie McPherson in the first round. A pair who I said couldn't be overlooked because they did beat Guo and Chen in Germany. I didn't see much of this match, so I can't really comment. So predictions on mixed, 1 out of 5. That's pretty shocking. But yeah, like I said, the mixed doubles was an incredibly the discipline that provided probably the most upsets and surprising, none more so than the pair that won. So overall, my total predictions was 12 out of 26. So pretty crap. But I think most people, if you put the names of all the players that made the semis or the finals, yes, the women's events kind of went as they should. They went precisely as they should. Top 4 seeds went through. But in the other 3 disciplines, they were throwing up all sorts of crazy results. And even within the players that you think should get there, there was still some surprises at the end. So 12 out of 26, pretty crap. So moving on, that is my predictions. My look at predictions, and like I said, I was going to talk about players and pairs and matches. I think I've done that to a good level. Now it's time, I think it's best to move on to your questions, because I think they cover a few other things that I've kind of left out. So anyway, before I do, thanks for your questions. I had absolutely bucket loads this time. I think this is the most amount of questions I've had. Clearly it was a tournament that garnered a lot of interest. It is the All England after all, but I think with not just that, but the fact that so much happened. So I'll do my best to answer these as best as I can. So, first question, why do so many Chinese athletes struggle here? Only the women's categories got to the finals. Is this a bad omen for the Chinese regarding the Thomas Cup? I kind of touched on this. I think I remember Steen Pedersen or Jill Clark talking about potential reasons, and that was in 2025. We always have a busy schedule. But 2025 also for China had the China National Games, which is a very important tournament. It's almost held in a similar regard to the Olympics, held every 4 years, and that was held last year. So it's just slightly less rest for the players. And then obviously the season just went from like finishing end of 2025 and starting straight away. And then looking ahead at this season, there are a couple of gaps in the World Tour. One of them is February. There's another one around May time. April, maybe now. This period is a little bit lower, and usually the one is September, but in September the Asian players have the Asian Games. So I don't know whether also it coincided with Chinese New Year, but I know that's not just Chinese players. There's a whole host of reasons as to why. Maybe they did take a little bit time off in February, didn't train as hard. It'd be surprising given how important the All England is, but maybe looking ahead, they prioritise others, and the fact that this slight period off just gave him that chance. Like I said, I think I did hear that Xi Yuqi hadn't trained too much for this All England, but that also could be personal to him. I think he did have a few issues with injuries at the end of Malaysia Open. I think he wasn't fully fit for that final. I think he then did withdraw from India because of it. So maybe that's more personal to him. I also heard something, I know they did win, but Lu Shengshu mentioned something about jet lag, so maybe some of the players turn up a little late and just weren't quite ready in the early rounds. That might explain some of the early round losses. But yeah, no, there could be a number of reasons. It's also the fact that badminton is just getting far deeper. There's so many good players and pairs from all different countries that China aren't quite, obviously, they're already seen as they are the top team in the world. But, there's plenty of other players. As for the Thomas Cup, I've never really, China in the Lin Dan days, yes, they were the favourites because you had Lin Dan, you had Khai and Fu, and all sorts, Chen Long. They had an absolute stacked lineup. But I'd say that whilst China are always in contention, I think, are they the defending champions? 2024 was one. I don't know why I can't remember who. No, I can't actually remember who won it last time. I feel like it was China. But anyway, we know that Thomas Cup has changed hands every single year for the last 10 years, if not more. No team has won it twice in a row since the Lin Dan peak era. You're up to 2012. Since 2014, I think it's changed hands every single time. And I think, yes, they're going to be difficult to beat. They have a good team, but not an infallible team. There's certainly some other countries that can capitalise on China. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's a bad omen for them regarding the Thomas Cup. In fact, there was some positives, like someone like Chen Boyang and Liu Yi having a good 2 tournaments, good 2 weeks. They're going to probably be the second pair. That's obviously a boost. But yeah, no. Of course. Anyway, I think there's not really too much to say unless I just keep going around in circles. Next question. What do you think about Christo Popov playing both men's doubles and men's singles? He would need to choose one at some point. This question was brought up by Gillen Steen again, and it's been brought up, I don't know, countless times, probably ever since Christo joined the World Tour and was playing doubles, after, say, the first year or two. Certainly in the last year or so, this question's come up more, especially as Christo has risen. He's now sitting at world number 5, won the World Tour finals. The question becomes even more prominent. And obviously, he became the first player, Christo, to get to the quarterfinals of the All England in the men's singles and men's doubles since, 1988? That's quite an achievement, but obviously, he's got the capability of winning an All England men's singles title. Did play really well in the men's doubles, but let's be honest here, the chances of them winning a men's doubles is incredibly slim, especially in comparison to the possibility for the men's singles. I personally do think he needs to specialise. I understand why they're playing men's doubles to an extent. They won the European Championships last year. Maybe they feel there's a few boxes they can tick. They seem very close as brothers, which obviously adds to that. They want to achieve some things together. Obviously, had they split up, a quarter-final in All England would never have happened. That's obviously a result. But in the big scheme of things, is if they continue to play both of them, I say this both of them, but maybe more so for Christo because he's the more successful at the moment. If, say, they continue playing both until the end of their career, and maybe will Christo look back and go, maybe I could have won a few more of those tournaments had I not played doubles? That's the kind of question he's got to ask himself. And I think personally, he needs to put everything into the singles. It just detracts from it. Of course, there's some skills that he will get from playing doubles that will help, like the flat game, etc. But you can still train that. You can do doubles in training or whatever it may be. I think playing it competitively just detracts just a little bit, and sometimes it only takes a few percent. The men's singles is so close. So tight. Even Jill Clark was saying, are we entering a new golden generation in men's singles? It's just that open. So many players can beat each other just on the day. And I think that's enough reason that I do think Christo Popov, personally, in my opinion, should focus on one over the other. And I think the same goes for Thoma. I do think the same applies to Thoma Jr. as well. Hong Wei and Nicole Chan's mixed doubles title for Chinese Taipei. What an achievement. So there's not really a question there. But obviously I haven't spoken about them because they were not my pick. I don't think they would have been anyone's pick. I think even some people have said, attached to when they asked me a question about them or talk about them, some people even admitted they hadn't really heard of them before. I had definitely heard of them before, especially Hong Wei. I can remember him playing a Thomas Cup, or was it Suleiman Cup, where he partnered Li Yang, and I think I even did a video for BWF about him because I loved his huge attack. I mean, the guy's got an absolute monster smash. What do they put in the water in Chinese Taipei? I swear that country, or what technique do they have? What hidden technique? They got some of the hardest hitters in the men's game, in the men's doubles game. I can't think of their names right now, but like Li Jiawei can absolutely lever it. There was a guy called Lee. That I know that's not narrowing it down. Back in the 2010s, absolutely melted the crap out of the shuttle. Wang Ling can absolutely dog it. Obviously, Lin Chunyi's attack has been making the headlines this week, and Hong Wei is exactly the same. I don't know what it is about Taiwanese athletes, but the technique for the smash seems to be something that they've got a secret that I wouldn't mind learning. Anyway, but this pair just silently came through the draw here. When I was watching them and I saw they got through to the quarterfinals, I was there. I kind of was half watching it. They were on the end court. And I was like, okay. And then they won. And then they beat the Hong Kong pair. And I was like, oh, okay. And then when it came to the French pair, I thought that the French pair's kind of organisation and the way that they played throughout the tournament might prove difficult for the Taipei pair. But they pulled it out. I was really impressed with Hong Wei's smash. He's so big and tall, but he's so good at it's like he can just hold his central position. You know, like Feng Enzer can do it, but that's because he's like 6'12". No, he's like 6'5" or whatever, but so tall, and his wingspan. Hong Wei is tall, but he can just reach and just look like he's not having to move. And then obviously if he gets the attack, bang, that ain't coming back. But I tell you what, Nicole Chan, really good. Like, I think Hong Wei's been around a bit longer, a bit more experience. So kind of, I know it's an All England, it's completely different, but he's played some big matches. So maybe he had a little bit more experience there. I thought that she just didn't look out of place, which was really impressive. I thought that from the start we'd see her looking a bit nervous, a little tense, but she looked so calm, like she belonged there. It was really, really good. I also did watch some of the interviews where she'd admitted that she'd been a bit lazy in her training, and it was Hong Wei that's kind of got her to train a bit harder, take a bit more time, look at tactical side of the game, look at loads of different aspects. And now she's saying that now we've won this, there's no way that I can go back to that. So clearly he's had a good influence on her. But again, just really, really impressive. Came out of absolutely nowhere. And it will be interesting to see whether they can build on this and become a top 10 pair, and a kind of pair that we see a little bit more often at the tail end of results. They certainly clearly got the game to do so. Did Pearly and Thinaah use the correct strategy in the semifinals against Baek and Lee So-hee? I know this question went on a bit more about basically saying they went for the long, drawn-out rally style, whereas in the final, Lu Shengxuan's handing more of the attacking style, and I think he was implying that Pearly and Thinaah can also do that, so maybe that was the approach. Yes, I already mentioned that it was earlier that it wasn't Baek and Lee So-hee that were trying to play the long rallies. It was actually the Malaysians. And yes, I would agree. Of course, in women's doubles, there's going to be that. You're going to have to place a lot of long drawn-out rallies, a lot of patient game. You know, attacks are good, but defenses are even better, and it's so hard to create opportunities in the women's doubles game. But I felt that they did go to that style a little bit too easily. I think these Malaysian players are much better when they play the more attacking, faster game. I do think, I've said this before about them, that I feel like they could get better at linking up. They feel, I know they get on, they're really good like friends off court, and they seem to have a really good connection off court. But on court, I feel like they're still not gelling as well as they could. They're like two very good individual players. Of course, there's the link-up play. You know, that's going to happen. But I feel like that they could do it way more. You know, both can hit it really hard. You know, Pearly Tan's got good variation with her stop drop. I think Thinaah could develop a few different shots, maybe some slices or a stop drop of her own, or something that's adds a few more dimensions to her attack. But I feel like when you watch them play, they win a lot through scrapping a lot back, and then they can play very, very fast. But they're not linking together as well as I think they should. And does that mean that they played the wrong game plan? Personally, yes, because I think in a war of attrition against the Koreans in a slow haul, I don't think they were going to come up best against that. They were more focusing on Lee So-hee. But like I said, I think the Koreans are in much better physical shape, and I think they worked really, really hard, so they were patient and very good at that. I think the Malaysians, personally, nothing wrong with doing a few of those long rallies. Maybe try and tire out Lee So-hee a bit, or whatever their game plan was. But then it wasn't delivering as well. I think they needed to switch it up, and I do think they needed to be a little bit more attacking, a bit more proactive, because they're certainly capable of doing that. What do you think about Aaron Tai and Kang Xing for beating Rankireddy Shetty? I did already talk about what I thought they did well. I thought they won the service situation really, really well. Their court coverage was absolutely insane. They were attacking really well, and I felt that the Indians didn't have a backup plan, and the defense just couldn't hold up against the Malaysians. As for their what do I think about them? I kind of guess I already said that. I think they're really exciting. Aaron Tai is a very exceptionally skillful player, really entertaining. He's almost like another Aaron Cha, but it's slightly different, maybe blended with a bit of Sukumoyo. He's got that kind of vibe about him. Very small, skillful, very quick, goes across the court. I think he will lend himself really well to Harry Ip's training style, the more Indonesian approach. I think he will lend it to him. And actually, at this All England, I thought Kang Xing showed massive improvement. He's the stockier, bigger one of the two, and playing with a really fast partner, you have to be fast enough to kind of keep up with it. And I think in some of their earlier matches, maybe at the end of last year, I watched them, I felt that he wasn't quite able to keep up, and it didn't. As a result, they didn't quite work as well together. But I've watched a few matches of theirs from this tournament, and when they won the Syed Modi as well, and I feel like he's definitely starting to kind of physically get a bit better, and as a result, I think that's why we're seeing results like the one they had at the All England. Certainly a pair to look out for the future. Next, thoughts on Indra and Joaquin. It's the Indonesian pair, Raymond Indra and Nikolaus Joaquin. Their first All England, they reached the semi-finals, and they put in a very good performance against Kim Won-ho and Seo Sun-jae. En route, they beat Kam Min-hyuk and Ki Dong-ju. They beat Fajro Alfian and Mohamed Shoaib Fikri, and then they beat Liang Wei Kang and Wang Chang in the quarterfinals. Three very good pairs, and especially in that quarterfinal against the Chinese, they absolutely blasted them off the court. Chinese looked completely lost. They had absolutely no answer to it. Really exciting pair. I think the best thing that can be said is Jill Clark was excited about them and said at the end of their match with the Koreans that they'd exceeded her expectations, and Steen backed that up. I've already said they didn't exceed mine because my expectations were already that high. I knew what they're capable of. Still very early days in their career as a partnership, and obviously more pairs are going to try to kind of analyze them and come up with solutions. So it's always going to be interesting to see how they handle that. I think one thing that's clearly a development thing is what the Koreans did was they took all the speed out of the game. They sucked the speed out. So how are the Indonesians able to deal with that? Do they need to get a little bit more of a bit better when it is a slower game, or how do they counter that and get it back playing to their own way? Lots of little areas that they're going to develop, but I've heard that they're a very hard-working pair, and that they listen to their coaches. They've got obviously a great coaching team. They've got a great sparring back in Indonesia, so I have no doubt that they're going to keep getting better and better and better, and I hope I get to see them at the Thomas Cup. I hope they get selected. I think they could be a definite second pair selection. It's going to be interesting to see who Indonesia sends to the Thomas Cup and who they field as well. But I think Raymond Indra and Nikolaus Joaquin, we might see them playing at second doubles. Next, thoughts on Lakshya's performance and what he can take away from it coming forward. Now, Lakshya Sen had an absolutely brilliant week, reaching the final. And I think, what I want to say about Lakshya Sen, I think I think it was that semi-final was a fantastic, it was summed up as a brave performance, and I think that's a really good way of putting it. 97 minutes with Victor Lai, and it was brutal. And when they changed ends at 11 in the third, he spent the whole break having his legs massaged and shook out. He was getting cramped, and it seemed like maybe it had taken its toll, that it was going to be too big a mountain to climb, but he found a way. He went extra sharp, and that last half, he went all in on his attack, and it was all pretty much coming off. And the fight and determination he did, there was also some really grueling rallies within that, and he kept going, showing really, really good fight. And I think for me, with Lakshya Sen, he showed more of the stuff that I saw when, did he reach the final in Hong Kong and he won the Australian Open? I praised him there, where just the things that he was doing well was when he was attacking, he hasn't got the biggest smash, but what he has really well is like he can do these subtle slices. I mentioned that earlier in this video when I was talking about his match versus Xiu Qi. He was making full use on his attack of the full court. So he'd do the drop shots. He'd do the smashes, very sharp. He can slice it. He can slice it even heavier. And then he was also using really good weighted and placed clears. He just made Xiu Qi just unable to be settled in his defense. And he showed that throughout the whole tournament. Really good attack. His physical game was excellent. Obviously, he became a bit unstuck in the final because of how hard he'd had to work throughout the whole tournament. But, you know, his speed off his attacks coming forward was sublime. I thought his net play was good. I've always really liked his ability to, from here, be able to kind of turn his backhand, like if he gets pushed here. Just the kind of little awkward, unorthodox angles he can create. There was more of that. His flat game was... There was just so many little things. It was also like... His retrieval skills has always been a good point, but his willingness, and maybe this comes down to he's probably in better physical shape. Like he could dive and then he'd spring up and then he's up in the air and he's then hitting like an angled shot. He's not like kind of like getting wrapped up in and then just belting it. He's getting up and then he's still able, after all that, dive on the floor, get up fast, jump up, and then hit a slice or hit a punch clear or whatever it may be. There was still that kind of composure under that sort of pressure. And I think in the final... You know, he put in a really brave performance. You know, we know he had been suffering from cramp the day before. You know, that's always going to be almost impossible to kind of recover from. We know he had the blisters on his feet, but the way that he played in that final, I already said, I think if he'd been like 5%, 10% fresher, I think he could have pushed that to 3, and then who knows, had it gone to 3 games. But yeah, a really positive week for him. That'll do him a world of good. Beating Xiu Qi, beating Li Shifeng, beating that Victor Lai in the semis in a grueling match, and then being able to put in a good final. Yeah, he'll be disappointed that he wasn't able to win the tournament, but lots of positives to take forward for him. And the next question actually is about his opponent in that semi-final, Victor Lai. What do I think about his performances and his future? He's just a cool customer, isn't he, old Victor Lai? I think what he does really well, and I actually think this is why it was such a long battle with Lakshya Sen, because they both got this quality of, if they're slightly under pressure, they're really good at, when they're slightly late, of playing the height. They do it from the front, but from the rear, like the high clear, and almost starting the rally again. Or they can play loopy, not loopy's maybe the wrong word, but loftier, but they come in really tight at the net. So playing the big court from a slightly pressured position. They can both play fast, and they can then both hit good attacking shots, especially Victor Lai. You know, if he suddenly works an opportunity and he can explode into a rally, and he gets up to attack, he's got a very lethal attack. But when he's not in a great position, he's very patient. And he does it in a way that he just moves his opponent lots, and he's conserving energy. And actually, Lakshya Sen's pretty good at that too, which is probably a reason why they had such a long semi-final. In terms of improvement areas, I do think he needs to get physically a little stronger, but more so, especially down his forehand channel. I feel that his movement to the forehand front of the court looks a little bit unstable for like world-class level. You know, this is being harsh, I know, but you need to be harsh if you're looking to kind of make those extra 5-10% jumps. I think if players to get him down to his front forehand corner, and even his defense off the forehand side, not so good. And again, I think, for example, if I use in the quarterfinals, you play Koki Watanabe. For a game and most, Koki was able to actually do this really well. I'm not sure whether he hit a wall or something, or he shut off, because he was doing it so good. His shots were accurate, and we know how good his drop shots are, especially that forehand cross, which is right to Victor's forehand. And I could see that Victor was struggling to get to those consistently. I think if Koki and Lakshya did it as well, open out the backhand side with whether you're playing drives or flat pushes or attacks, and then go out over to the forehand side. Again, I think, yeah, for Victor Lai, in terms of areas to improve, that would certainly be one of them, is being able to, his movement, his defensive shot situations to the forehand side. I think another one, whilst he does this really well, because he's quite a counter player, like he's very patient, buys his time, and then suddenly can inject pace. I feel like a lot, especially in the earlier rounds, he could have injected pace a little bit earlier in the rallies. He waited almost too long, especially against Lakshya Sen in the semi-finals. I think he could have gone in a little bit earlier, and maybe created a few more easier chances for him. But maybe that's not an overall development. Maybe that's just something specific to that match. Who knows? But definitely as an overall thing, having watched a number of his matches, the forehand, the front. But he's got a bright future. The fact that he hasn't spent much time at this level, this is really his first full year on the World Tour. He's already reached the semifinals of India, Super 750, semifinals of the All England. He reached semifinals of the World Championships last year. For someone from Canada, that's very impressive, and he looks like he belongs there. And so we're only going to see more and more, and that's fantastic, not just for him and his fans, but also for men's singles in general. So yeah, that was the last one, because I don't know why, but question 10 is thoughts on Lakshya Sen's performance. I've already answered that question. So I've been going on for an hour and a half now. I think that's more than enough from me. I think I've covered most things. There was so much that go on, so of course I probably would have left out a few things. So if I have, feel free to add them in the comments. Obviously, you can add your thoughts to what I've said. You can agree, disagree. You can also belittle me for my rubbish predictions. It's all good. Let's just keep it somewhat positive. No, not too much like personal attacks. That's all good. I'm all up for constructive criticism. So a little break now in terms of these breakdowns. I think the next tournament where I'll be doing a breakdown, which will also include some previews and also more predictions, will be the Thomas and Uber Cup, which comes at the end of April. And like I said, I've got a bit of an announcement in regards to that, but I'll do that nearer the time. In the meantime, I'm also working on one or two more produced and edited products, a bit like the last one on the Hartono versus Sven pre-match. Got a couple of those lined up that I'm going to try to get done before the Thomas and Uber Cup. So plenty more content to come from me. I hope you'll be there for it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I've really enjoyed talking about this All England. And yeah, well, I will see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you later.